a Democratic member of the House Appropriations Committee. Congressman, let's start with your reaction to the violent attack on Speaker Pelosi's husband. You see some reacting properly on the other side of the aisle. I will say Kevin McCarthy did a perfect job of reacting on that soundbite, appropriately so, as opposed to that of Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, who actually used the attack to very tastelessly say that they were going to send Nancy Pelosi back to California to be with her husband. That was just tasteless, is the best way to describe it. But does all of this, the tenor of all this, increase concerns about your own safety and that of your family and those who work with you?
Well, first, we want to extend our thoughts about Paul Pelosi, the Speaker, and their family at this awful time. I mean, there's absolutely no excuse on any part of the political spectrum for what's happening. And we're seeing this increased. There's a member that I know recently who had to move from their house because of threats that they were receiving. And I don't know a member that I've talked to that hasn't received political threats. And this has really been on an increase, especially since, honestly, the Trump administration. I think a lot of the rhetoric and the way the president kept himself in talking in some of the more violent terms at rallies and things like that has certainly led to increased, and we have actual factual counts of increased threats to members of Congress. And, that's got to stop. I'll be honest, there's a reason why a lot of us don't rush to go on TV because I will get a lot of calls after this, and there may very likely be a threat in there. And that's one of the problems with, I think the current political environment, and it has to stop. And, even worse, Alex, if I can, I've seen online, there are now people questioning whether what happened really happened, and they're trying to make that a conspiracy. Please. And I got to admit, the amount of rage I have when that happens is pretty increased.
There's no reining in the crazy. I got to tell you, that is absolutely ridiculous. But you mentioned the Trump administration, and your time in office, sir, encapsulates that period. How different is the political environment now? You began in Congress about a decade ago. How's it compared to then? And how can we make the country safer for our elected officials?
Yeah, next year, 30 years, local, state, and federal office. I've been involved with being in public service. I've never seen it like this. I've never seen the rhetoric, the level, the fact that people so much more overtly will say things that, used to be, more clandestine, not with their name, not leaving any kind of message other than the threat over the phone machine, the message machine. But now people are a little more blatant about that because they feel like they've got someone who has their back because of the rhetoric, I think, that Donald Trump put out there. So, it's just a time that we all need to respect. We're all part of the human race. We got to be like humans. And, I don't care if this happens to a Republican or a Democrat. This is an awful situation. You can't have someone trying to stop political activity by violence. And this is something we all need to stand up to. It doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum. This should be a no-brainer.
Yeah, it affects everybody. Okay, let's move on, sir, to former President Barack Obama, who, as you know, was campaigning for Democrats in Wisconsin yesterday. Here's part of his message to the voters there on the GOP. Take a listen.
This current crop of Republican politicians, they're not interested in solving problems. They're interested in making you angry and then finding somebody to blame. And they're hoping that that'll distract you from the fact that they don't have any answers of their own.
So President Obama is clearly the strongest Democrat messenger out there right now. Do you wish that he had started earlier, or is this exact amount and timing going to work best?
Well, it's great because this is the time most people are paying attention to elections, honestly. So it's helpful. But I'll tell you, the most powerful thing he did yesterday is the message around Social Security. We know that a lot of people are still concerned about the economy, and that's part of why Democrats in some places might not be as good of a place that they should be. But that's global inflation, right? It's not about Democrats or Joe Biden. However, what he pointed out yesterday in Wisconsin was that the Republican Study Committee has a plan to put Social Security on the chopping block every 5 years. Ron Johnson, my U.S. Senator in Wisconsin, wants to put it on the chopping block every year. We know that Republicans have said they were going to go after Roe versus Wade, and a half century later, they're able to get rid of it. You have to believe them when they say they're going to go after Social Security and Medicare and putting on the chopping block. And I think that was a really important message that the president said when he was in Wisconsin yesterday.
How much of a boost do you think he's going to have at the ballot box ultimately?
I'll tell you, I love Barack Obama's messaging. There's no one else who does it quite like that.
And his delivery is great, let me tell you.
And his delivery, and he's also a little bit Barack Obama unplugged, so he doesn't have to have maybe some of the stiffness he needed to have sometimes when he was president. He's just saying it like it is. But, you know, on issues like Social Security, he was extremely powerful. Everyone, whether it's themselves or their parents or their grandparents, can be negatively affected by what the Republicans want to do by putting it on the chopping block. And he just delivered that core economic message so well. We all need to be doing that in these closing days.
Let's turn to that letter that was released this week. You and 29 of your progressive colleagues signed the letter. It has since been retracted, and it called on the president to, quote, engage in direct talks with Russia in an effort to end the war in Ukraine. First of all, do you still believe in what that letter says, its content?
Yeah, so it shows, you know, it's a 24-hour story that shows how important timing is in politics, right? It was a letter that was signed by most of us back in July, some even in June. That was when we first heard some rumblings about Putin talking about nukes. There were some folks who wanted to have us be in more active role than we were, which is assistance to Ukraine. And we were having the president's back. So we said, keep diplomacy on the table. That's essentially what the letter says. And for whatever inexplicable reason, it got released 3 months later. And as you know, timing is everything in politics. So a letter that actually supported the president and our position on supporting Ukraine became that we were somehow at a divide by a news outlet that, you know, probably was confused by the timing of the letter, rightfully so. Fortunately, it was taken out. The story is done. We support the president and our efforts and helping the people of Ukraine. What we don't want to do is send troops in, as I think most Americans don't want to send troops of our own there. But it's important that we continue to do the support that we're doing.
I think you were right about all those points, and I believe it was Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal who said it was an accidental misfire. But as you said, difficult timing, 24 hours news story. Sorry, I made it a little bit longer than 24 hours, but it's good to speak with you about it. Congressman Mark Pocan, thank you. So next, why legendary journalist Bob Woodward calls Donald Trump